Just in the last hour, he has slapped comprehensive sanctions on the state of Colombia in South America because they refused his unilateral attempt to land 2 military aeroplanes full of deportees in their country without so much as a by your leave. Now, the officials of the Colombian government will not be allowed to enter the United States, and 25% tariffs have been slapped on all imports from Colombia. And this just a day after an attempt was made to do the same thing in Mexico, an altogether bigger enchilada, if you'll forgive the pun. Mexico is a very large and important country, both in the Americas and throughout the global South. It has a highly respected, democratically elected, unimpeachable woman president of considerable note. And she told Donald Trump to get lost. The idea that Latin American countries are going to allow themselves, without negotiation of any kind, without payment of any kind, to be a dumping ground for the United States, frankly, showboating with tiny numbers of deportees. I mean, there are tens of millions of illegal immigrants inside the United States. 110 on a plane to Colombia is not even a drop in the ocean. So now we await what Trump will do about Mexico. Will he try to do what he's done about Colombia, or will he end this foolishness and get around a table with his neighbors and bring about an agreement that will facilitate the perfectly legitimate United States government wish to rid its country of illegal immigrants? A country which has no border isn't a country at all. A country which has no border cannot be described as a state. A country elects a government, and they, and no one else, must determine who is allowed into it and who must leave. But international law is very clear. You can't just put people on an airplane and drop them anywhere else that you fancy. And so there's trouble at mill on the Latin American front, especially as little Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State for the United States, is pretty hot for regime change in countries like Nicaragua and perhaps Venezuela and even Cuba. So trouble in the insultingly phrased backyard of the United States. Actually, the United States is the backyard of Latin America, but understandably, they don't like it put that way. And of course, in the north of the Americas, Donald Trump continues to boast that he's going to absorb Canada, a British Commonwealth country, with a functioning parliament and government led, alas, by one idiot after another, but a huge country, second biggest country in the whole world. Donald Trump's just going to eat it, just like that, make it the 51st state of the Union. Again, he didn't even talk to the Canadian political class before shooting off his mouth about ending their national sovereignty. And ditto in Greenland. Now, it may very well be that so cuckolded is the Danish government to the United States that they will simply sit down and watch whilst Donald Trump has his way with their sovereign territory of Greenland. But no, they've washed their hands. They've said this is a matter for the people of Greenland, and as I've pointed out before, there's only 50,000 of them, and I've no doubt that Donald Trump Jr. has already offered to make each and every one of them a millionaire. And it may very well be that Denmark allows Greenland to be absorbed as a United States territory. How Russia will react to that, given its proximity to the Arctic, where Russia has vital national interests will again be a matter of some importance. And the Panama Canal. Trump shot the breeze with what turns out to be entirely fallacious argument. He said, we built the Panama Canal, and now China is running it. That would indeed be a remarkable thing if it were true, but it is fundamentally untrue. China is not running the Panama Canal. The Panama Canal is run by the Panamanian state, which was given back control of its own sovereign territory and the canal therein by the United States of America not even 50 years ago. So when Trump says that we are going to take back control of the Panama Canal, he is picking a fight with an otherwise deeply loyal satrap in the state of the presidency of Panama. But the two biggest enchiladas of all are the ones that are going to occupy me for the rest of the monologue. I was very happy that Trump beat Kamala Harris because I believed he was going to stop the war in Ukraine. And as that war was pregnant with the greatest threat ever since World War II of a nuclear conflagration between the superpowers, no issue, none, could conceivably be more important than that. All other issues, whether Palestine or gender or economic policy, all of these things pale into insignificance if the world goes up in nuclear smoke. And we've asked the question in our poll tonight, and it's pretty damn close. Will Trump end the war in Ukraine? Yes or no? Although a very small majority say yes, a very large minority say no. And the proximate reason for that is undoubtedly Trump's loose-jawed rhetoric about Russia over these last few days. I understand that he has a public opinion at home. I understand even more that he has a deep state constituency just waiting for the opportunity to spout Russia, 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 as they did for 4 long years during his first term. I understand his need as the author of The Art of the Deal to come to the table with apparently something in his hand to negotiate. But that's not what worries me. What worries me is that the statements of the United States president are so utterly ignorant of the facts that one must conclude that he either does not read the papers that are being given to them, or the same people that gave Joe Biden the papers are writing the papers for Donald Trump. Let's just analyze one or two of the blunders that Trump made. First of all, he said Russia helped the United States to win the Second World War. I had this vision of, a Trumpian figure up the flagpole at the Reichstag, flying the stars and stripes over the rubble of Berlin as Hitler lay dying just a few hundred yards away. Russia helped America to win the Second World War? Are you crazy? 88% of all German casualties in the Second World War were inflicted by the Red Army. The Soviet Union lost at least 26 million people in repelling and conquering the Nazi beasts in the Second World War. Britain and the United States didn't even lose 1 million between them. That's not in any way to denigrate or invalidate the great sacrifice made by the other allies in the Second World War. In fact, if it hadn't been for Britain's refusal to surrender, the Second World War would never have happened in the way that it subsequently did. If Churchill had said, okay, hands up, give us your surrender terms, things would have been very different indeed. And of course, particularly on D-Day in 1944, the sacrifice of American GIs, Canadian forces, and others, as well as, of course, the British, from whose territory the invasion was launched, made very serious contributions to the defeat of the Nazis in the West. But the war was not won in the West. The Soviets were already on their way to Berlin when finally, after years of delay, a second front was opened. Take this in the context that on the 80th anniversary, tomorrow, of the liberation of Auschwitz, Russia is not invited, even though it was Russian troops who liberated the camp. The Ukrainians are there, though they built the camps. The Poles are there. They were their camps. The Germans are there, though it was Germany that killed the best part of 100 million people in the Second World War. And Russia is not invited to the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. But even all of that is not the most serious blunder that Donald Trump made, running off at the mouth just the other day. The most serious blunder was when he threatened Russia with tariffs and sanctions. Now, why that is important is that there is nothing to put tariffs on. And if Donald Trump doesn't know that, if he doesn't know that there is no trade between Russia and the United States, therefore nothing to put tariffs on, then one wonders just how closely he's been reading this brief. He went on to say that Putin had wrecked the Russian economy, when it's the European economies that have been wrecked at American insistence. The Russian economy is booming. It's booming. Trump seems to think it's been wrecked. And therefore, a significant number of people are asking themselves, is this Donald Trump for real? But perhaps the most immediate, incredible blunder made by Trump this day was to state that he intends to force Jordan and Egypt to take the refugees from Gaza, 1.5 million of them. Now he's promising a house for all these Palestinian refugees. Like they put up 76 years of struggle because they wanted a new house, a council house. Does Donald really think that the Palestinians in Gaza can be purchased for a council house in Jordan or in Egypt? How stupid is that? Now, of course, even worse, from America's geopolitical point of view, both of the Jordanian and Egyptian states would collapse if they were to agree to the mass, unwilling transfer of millions of Palestinian refugees into their country. Jordan is already more than half of its population are Palestinian refugees. And Donald thinks that the king can take more He thinks the king can say, yes, please, build us some council houses and send us millions of Palestinian refugees so that Israel can have Gaza as a piece of real estate and a new gas station. How many Arab governments do you think, Donald, could survive that level of betrayal, upheaval, social dislocation? And the Palestinians would not go. I give you that cast iron assurance. They would rather live in the rubble of their house in Gaza than in your brand new Kushner designed and built council house in Jordan or Egypt. Because it's not about houses, Donald. It's not about economic well-being. If the Palestinians had been interested in pound, shillings, pence, dollars, cents, standard of life, they would have surrendered in 1948. They would have said, okay, we've lost. Our country no longer exists. It's been wiped off the map. Hire us to hew your wood and draw your water. And by now, they'd have a decent, if third world, standard of living. But they did not do that. And they will not do that. Because for them, this is a matter of national liberation. Surely Americans can understand that. They had a country, then they didn't. They want it back. They want to be able to live as Palestinian citizens in Palestine. I've got a better idea for you, Donald. Two, actually. Move the Palestinian refugees from Gaza into the Galilee, into Nazareth, where there is plenty of land, plenty of what you insultingly called Arab villages, though they are towns and cities. And then the Palestinians in Gaza will still be living in Palestine. That's what to do, but even better. Here's an even better idea. Why don't you take your finger out your substantial arse and do something about all these promises that were made on the White House lawn by your predecessor, whose funeral you attended, that there should be a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. I'll be right back. Stay tuned.